is Real People, Real Matters with Diana Tulchinsky. I'd like to introduce my guest, Mia McNary of Mia Galleries.
Hi.
I want to ask you a couple of questions about your career and transitions as an artist. What age did you start to draw as a child?
I don't remember the exact age, but I know that I have sketchbooks since I've been about 7 years old. And I've had sketchbooks from that point on, probably 3 or 4 a year. So our basement is just filled with tons of sketchbooks.
And where did you grow up in the Chicagoland area?
I was born in Park Ridge, and then we moved around the country and ended up in Winnetka and went to New Trier. Then I went off to college.
And did your mother and father support your decision to be an artist in high school or in college?
They knew my passion for the creative process and creative sketching. I had papers all over the place sketching. And so they always knew that there was something I was very passionate about, and they always encouraged us to follow our passion because they felt like that's where your mission is supposed to be and where you're best suited career-wise. So, but they also made it very clear that if you do decide to go in that direction, that you need to be able to support yourself. And they gave us kind of a deadline, all of us, of like 2 months, and you need to get an apartment. So I knew that when I was going in my freshman year that I had to take some courses that may not be as exciting to me, but I knew that it would be good long-term for other opportunities where, it might not be all creative, might be some creative and some, let's say accounting.
And speaking of college, where did you go to the East Coast for Carnegie?
Yeah, I went to Carnegie Mellon, and I remember I was not going to go there because I was like, oh, I don't want to go to Pittsburgh. But the very first time I went to Pittsburgh, I was just amazed on how beautiful the city was and how that school was really the best match for what I was looking for in having a blend of high tech and the creative process. The abstract problem solving was really a big thing for all colleges within that school. So,
what was your favorite computer sci program at Carnegie Mellon?
Well, we had to take basic programming, and that was like Pascal, and that was something that is not really used anymore. But but we had to use, there was a software program at the time called Panda, and that was where we would have to program shapes and different very basic images for our computer graphic lab. And I remember thinking there's no way I could do this all the time, but I learned the basic skills of putting, why certain things have to happen in a program and how you have to kind of problem solve through it, which has been useful now because anytime I'm kind of reading about things or new apps and things, I love to see how it's actually put together, the architecture of it.
And I understand you had like a study abroad in Florence, Italy through Carnegie?
Yeah, I actually went there one summer because it's actually kind of a funny story. I had a great aunt who gave me a book when I was 10 on Leonardo da Vinci. And I loved that book about Leonardo so much that I kept saying to my parents every year after that, when do I get to go to Italy? When do I go to Italy? So finally, when I was 19, they said, all right, you can go. And at that time, I went with the Syracuse program in the summer in Florence, and I remember thinking to myself, this is where I'm supposed to be. I love this place. But I also realized I wanted more of a real Italian experience. So after that year, I decided that I wanted to go to an international school, which was Saatchi Studio Arts International. And it's still in Florence, but my roommates were from all over Europe and Asia. So that was really neat to have that experience of living with people who didn't speak English, and the only way we could communicate was through Italian, so it's very neat.
Did you have like any Italian before you went to the summer in Florence?
I did study Italian, and but you can never study enough before you go live there, because it's a life-changing time in your life, because you realize the simple things that you can't communicate with other people. And so as you come into those situations where you don't have the right words, you soonly look back at your dictionary and look up those words. And that's kind of how I learned it. Obviously, I had intensive classes in that, in Italian when I was there, but it was one of those things where it's just hard to experience that, like learning a language when you're not in the country. You could sit in a classroom in the United States and learn things, but until you're kind of faced with, oh, como se dice, what's that word again? And it's in real time and people are talking to you really fast. It's a lot different than in U.S. Classroom. So I just felt like that's something that all kids should really have that experience, because it really humbles you, and it also makes you realize the people that do come to this country, it's really impressive what they do. So I have my heart goes out to people who are having a struggle with the language. I always try to help them.
And speaking of language, like, what's the methodology, I guess, in Italy when they train you, I guess, in classical and modern? Did anything strike your mind looking back?
I just remember I had a fantastic design professor, Paolo Bottagucci, and he was amazing because he was really into the problem solving, and he would give a question, and he because he had his own design firm, he would say, all right, I want you to design the cover for this new magazine, or this magazine that's coming out, and in Europe the magazines have so many words on it, more words than in the U.S. So it was a little adjustment to learn that design piece. But then you would go and you'd learn like just the traditional design stuff. Mm-hmm. But then later that afternoon, you might be, sketching La David, of Michelangelo's, so you kind of got both sides of like what's really needed in, like, let's say, the marketplace at that time, and then learning about the classic proportions and color combinations and just kind of the understanding of when you do art, it's a story. It's a story, and a lot of times they were using biblical stories or historical stories with the art that you would be studying. So I found that really fascinating, so much so that I have a minor in art history, because I found it so fascinating how different artists got their, break.
And what was your favorite museum visiting there, or like ultimate? I know in Florence they have so many museums there.
I really loved the Accademia, and of course the Uffizi is amazing. Another place that a lot of people miss is Pitti Palace, is just as in Boboli Gardens are beautiful. Because I'm an outdoor sketch, I love to sketch outside, and a lot of in Pitti Palace they have like these really interesting sculptures that are just amazing, how you can go right up to a Donatello and like so close, versus the United States that have like it blocked off, and and it was kind of outside, or just I was amazed by that. It's just amazing just to be able to interact with these famous pieces of artwork.
And if you think about Carnegie, what is the education versus, I guess, Harrington School of Design, like, versus commercial versus classical art? Where do you recommend, or as a budding artist in the graphic arts?
I think a decision for finding the right school is such a personal thing. I think when you are really wanting a full rounded experience, I think for me the right choice was to go to a university. Mm-hmm. Because and also at the time I really was interested in computer graphics and wanted to kind of have a blended opportunity of having really good cost accounting, just business classes, which it would have been a little more difficult to take in a strictly art school. Mm-hmm. I don't know all the classes at Harrington, and I know that Carnegie Mellon teaches, really on problem solving. I'm sure they do as well. Mm-hmm. I think it's, like I said, it's a very personal choice.
And how, from your career as advertising exec, how did you start Lee Burnett? Like, how did the transition from school to, I guess, work life?
I was really lucky. I got an internship when I was a sophomore in college, and I worked in the production department. And there I found it was kind of interesting for me because it was a blend of creative and tech, because we had to work with some, printing presses and different retouching, which was computer graphics, and art directors and account people. So you had to be really good at multitasking, detail information, and also just relationship building. Mm-hmm. So for me, that was great. I left and went to Italy, and then I came back and, really started talking to them about a full-time job. Luckily, at Carnegie Mellon, they had a internship that I was lucky to be a part of, which was kind of a co-op type program, which was with the graphic arts. So I got exposure to, real printing presses, real, how to actually make proofs, where many people are not able to do that at that early stage of education and stuff as a senior. And so when I was waiting to hear back from the wonderful people at Leo Burnett, I sent them a Valentine, which on the Valentine I put "hire me" on it. And it was funny, I thought as I dropped it in the mail, I thought this is either like I'll never get a job from them or I'll get a real fast response, which luckily I did get a really fast response, and so I knew where I was going in my like in February, my senior year, which was really a huge relief for me.
That's wonderful. And who was your mentor there?
My mentor at
Leo Burnett.
Joe McCowan. He was a fantastic boss because he had a very clear structure of how things are done. And so I was trained by really the best. And then from that point on, I always kind of carried that kind of that mentor type ways of doing the production for anything that I faced, like, you know, this is what we need and things. So it's always really nice and it's not really a mentor. You don't choose a mentor. I think a mentor chooses you. And I think I was lucky that he chose me.
And did you go to Foote later on?
I went to Foote Belding. I left Leo Burnett, and it was really hard for me because I loved my job. I remember every day I'd go and I'd go, I can't believe they're paying me. It's so fun. Because I worked with such fabulous people, but I moved out to San Francisco and got a job at Foote Belding as their head of production, and it was a wonderful place to be for when I was there. And then it came time for me to actually come back for many reasons, and came back to Chicago, and then I worked at J. Walter Thompson. And there was an art buyer and production. So for me, that was really fun to kind of do both.
And did you work in a Thompson Cruise Lines advertising campaign?
I worked on Princess Cruise Lines. Princess Cruise Lines. And that was, I was able to take my things I learned at Leo Burnett on the United Airlines account, and I was able to switch it right over to another travel industry client, Princess Cruise Lines. And so it was really nice to come in when it was a brand new client for the agency and come in and be really successful right away. So it was nice.
And I understand in San Francisco you also had a hobby as a chef?
I did. I went to chef school. I did on the weekends. I always, being a creative person and curious, and there's so many great restaurants there. It was really, really fun to just go and learn about how everything's put together. And I was able to go to the Culinary Institute, California Culinary Institute, or a Cordon Bleu school. And so we'd wear the chef hats and everything and cook for people on the weekends. And I always laugh because I thought, oh gosh, I hope that person likes it out there, because I could see them out. It was really funny, yeah.
And I was wondering about your career as an artist. You entered an exhibit in 1985 for the Chicago Club. Mm-hmm. How did that build social connections in Chicago later on?
Yes, a very dear friend of mine asked me to participate in this program because he knew I was always sketching and doing things, so that was great. It sold, and it was wonderful to be at that reception because I met some really interesting people. Some of them I served on boards with. I was on the Lincoln Park Zoo board, and a lot of them didn't know that I was an artist, which was kind of funny to me because I was always in the business side, but always still sketching and drawing all the time. So it's just funny how people kind of view you a certain way, which really to me is who I am as an artist.
And I understand you're an artist, but you're also an art therapist or a Misericordia.
Yes, I work at Misericordia, or I should say volunteer at Misericordia, with the residents there, and I've been doing that for at least 5 years. And it's a great opportunity because I got to learn from Kurt, who runs a department, Vondelat, and he has been a wonderful mentor to me, encouraging me to continue in getting some certain certification in the REIS program, which is for expressive artists, which is kind of in the area of therapeutic type art expression. And I've just learned a ton from him of just how to simplify processes for people who might have challenges even just holding a brush.
As an art teacher, how do you give children skills enough to develop their needs in the schoolroom and in the real life?
I really work on my students, and I try to hone in on what their style is. I don't try to get them so all the art looks the same. I want them to enhance who their style is, and a lot of times, so much so that I'll pair them up with a master artist like Dubuffet. If someone's really into doodling, I go, you should check out Dubuffet. Or if you're really into perspective, you should look at, Escher's work. And so I try to show them that you don't need to compare your work to who's sitting next to you. And what happens is with that, it gives each person that comes in my studio, adult or child, confidence in their own style, and they become more invested in improving it.
What is the importance of storytelling in a classroom or even in an art studio?
Well, all art is a story, and in the galleries and museums, you'll see that. They'll talk about different times, history, encapsulating different big moments in history because maybe there wasn't photography at the time, or it's just a statement. And so that's what I always say to my students, it's really important to know that you can draw a flower in a vase, but make the petals be your friends. Like, this is my friend, so-and-so and so-and-so. Because then what happens is the art starts having energy to it. And that energy then is really exciting to the person who painted it because they want to tell people the story within kind of like almost in an abstract way. They could look at it and say, oh, it's a beautiful flower, vase of flowers. And then they start saying, well, actually, this is my friend Carol, and this is my friend Susie, and this is, and it becomes really interesting, and it becomes more enjoyable for everyone looking at it.
And do you have like a favorite character, Kirby, that you talk about?
I do. It's kind of a funny story. I was at a rummage sale with my sister because I always love getting these weird things for my studio. And there was like the last moment of this rummage sale. And I remember there was this thing left on this table by itself. It was this furry thing. And so it just became a part of the studio because my sister encouraged me to pick it up and take it back to the studio. And it's become a mascot. And I joke with my students that someone's later in life is going to have a clothing line, and that's going to be the logo. It's going to be this Furby Kirby thing, which is really, really funny. So.
And I understand you have 3 children, one with special needs.
Yes, we have 3 children. We have Patrick, who's 16, Colin, who's 14, and Mary Jane, who's 13. And they just are great. Our middle son, Colin, is the one who has autism and epilepsy and some other challenges. And he currently lives in Wichita, Kansas at a therapeutic residential school.
And tell me how he became to Heartspring Therapeutic School.
Yeah, so it was just real evident for us that his behaviors were rapidly challenging everyone. And it became obvious that the current system was not working for him long term. So we decided it was time for him to be at a place that was safe for him because of his eloping and challenging behaviors. And that's really where, many things happened before that, but really what happened for me is I started realizing I never knew that I was able to do, advocacy. I never knew that I was able to do fundraising. I never knew I could read, journals on medical journals and all different sorts of things I was kind of pushed into as a mother, having a child that had so many complex needs. And, I'm grateful for that because I think all families are really pushed to the limit and that you never really realize your potential until you're faced with a problem. And that's what I really bring back to my studio and the people that come into my studio is I always tell them, you're so lucky you can talk. You're so lucky you can tie your shoes. You're so lucky that you can do X, Y, Z. And I think sometimes people put so much pressure on doing things to outpace the other person so they can get a better placement at college or whatever. And I'm like, it's about being like right now, being the best person you can be. So that's why I just, remind them. I used to coach hockey here in Glenview, and they thought it was really funny. I was the only mom that showed up for this. But for me, it was the only time I could spend time with our son, Patrick, who skated. And it was great because I actually knew how to skate and had a blast doing it. And the kids always knew. And I would say to them, you're absolutely incredible, because they were the same age as our son, Colin. And I just couldn't believe the moves that they could do. And they were like, she's so enthusiastic.
Yeah, I bet as a mom.
I just knew what they were able to do, which they didn't even realize what they were doing. So I'm a big cheerleader for a lot of kids around here.
What is Camp Hug the Bear? It started in Glenview, I understand?
Yes, it's a special needs camp for kids that are really young, ages 3 through 5. It was set up by my husband and I designed it and spearheaded getting it going because there was no program for young children that had autism or sensory issues during the month of August, which is a tough month for most parents of young children because they're so busy, busy bees. And I found that once we started pulling people together from the village, because we've lived here for such a long time, it was amazing, the outpouring of generosity, because we had to raise funds to make the camp start. And we had a goal of $4,000, and we were able to raise $16,000 the first year, $16,000. It was absolutely incredible. And the following year, we ended up raising another $15,000, and so that money was kind of put aside for Camp Hug the Bear to blossom and get bigger as the years move on. And the reason why it's called Camp Hug the Bear, because of the Glenview phrase, is about community giving, and that was our most incredible awareness of how generous this town is when there's a problem. It's a pretty big town, but it's actually a really small town.
And what's your best accomplishment for your daughter, too?
You know, Mary Jane is a lot like me, and she's a very creative thinker. I'm more of a 2D person. She's more 3D. And she's always is very compassionate to others. She's very sensitive to other people's needs. I know she'll do great things in life because she has that sensitivity to making the world a better place.
Tell me about your painting Colin Leaves, like that was important.
Yeah, Colin, it's this one. Colin letting go. Letting go but not giving up. And it's all about when Colin had to leave our house to go to the school. It was really hard on me. And I remember thinking to myself, I don't know how how I can breathe, because so much of my life was wrapped around taking him to therapies, as well as my husband's. And, it was just a lot of draining of all of our energy. And so to have him not with us on a daily basis was feeling like someone died, because he wasn't there, and we learned to adjust. But what I realized from that time was that I needed to do something to help people that might be in that situation later. And that's what really, really moved my art, my own personal art, to more of letting others learn some skills that I've learned over the years. And I started with one student, and I told my friend, don't tell anyone, because I don't know if it's going to work. And then she brought a friend the next week, and before you know it, I was up to 80 students. And so it was one of those things where the best marketing I've ever done was to say, don't tell anyone, because the word got around. And because I was doing it differently. I wasn't doing it matched, everyone looks the same. And so we would have art shows, and everyone would walk around and say, it's truly amazing that the work, maybe one assignment might be, on, what's your favorite memory of your family vacation? And they went to, they might have gone to the same place, but they had different points of view of that time and how they integrated words and situations. It was really interesting.
Did any of your students enter the Glenview Art League?
Yes, they have. Many years they have. The last few years they haven't, just because of timing of things. But I've always encouraged them to do that, because I feel like, we usually wear our shirts, like MIA shirts, and kind of, because what I found is people typically are sports-oriented kids, or they're not so sports-oriented. And I feel like sometimes my studio becomes their team. And I love it, because they're very proud to say that they're from the studio, because I really honor each student individually. And I always tell them, once you're my student, you're always my student. You can leave, but you'll always, I hope that you'll come back. And one of the things I always share with them too is I said, I know you guys are going to get great awards in life, and I hope that you will always send me a ticket. And I'm talking big awards. I'm talking Oscars, Emmys, all sorts of things. I go, please send me an invitation to the event. And I go, you might have to send me a plane ticket too. So they're like, absolutely. So because I encourage them to be who they are, and to that being a creative person is not being a painter on a canvas. I mean, that's all. That's what I love to do. But having that opportunity to do that, plus utilizing the skills you learn from that, is really important in business.
And if a student wants to become both a mathematician and an artist, how do you juggle their creativity process, their cognitive development, for example?
That's a really good question. I think it's really kind of boils down to, I'm not in the public schools, but I do encourage them to take visual notes when they can, or take their notes from when they were in science class or math class and try to visualize the complex content. And I do this all the time. I wish someone told me when I was younger that this is something that's okay to do. So many teachers nowadays say, stop doodling, you're goofing off. But 40% of people that are walking around are visual learners. So you have visual learners who are not being allowed to like take in the information and output it so they remember it in a visual way. And then they've just recently come out with research showing that 29% of the people who take visual notes, like doodles, actually retain the information 29% higher than someone who just writes notes. I found that fascinating. So you'll see that more and more because people are looking for, like out in Google, out in Silicon Valley, there's so much more on visual processing because there's so many different people doing collaboration in different fields, and they might not know what the full picture is. So by visually, using the whiteboard, to kind of talk about an idea, that's how it comes together. So I bring the information like that I've spoken at Kellogg Business School and different places around Chicagoland, how important it is to even in your homework to be able to bring the concepts together in a visual form because you're using your left and right brain and it locks it in, not just for the test, for long term. So it's something I really feel very passionate about because I've seen it for myself. I can go back over my notes, my doodle notes, and I can know exactly what was said during that meeting.
And what is the future endeavors for Mia Art Galleries and Studio?
It's a big question. I have a lot of passions in a lot of different areas. I really feel very strongly that I want my studio to be a space for many things, but one of them is to inspire businesses around the Chicagoland area to come in and do visual processing, because I feel like that's an area where I keep hearing a lot of that in the news, where people are really trying to, inspire more innovation within their corporation. So I am a studio for the fine arts, but I'm also a kind of brand person that can work on brands and new products. Like the pharmaceutical industry is a perfect application for using the image process for like tear sheets and things like that for their the pharmaceutical reps to go into their doctors.
That was very inspirational. Thank you, Mia, for today's show.
Thank you so much, Diane, for asking me to come here. My MIA studio is located at 1940 Lehigh here in Glenview. Thank you.
And thank you for watching Real People, Real Matters.